Greetings, Guardians, my name is Byfear. So there are many secrets out there in the Ascendant Plane, but there's one that we should really be examining because it's just strange. Weirdly interconnected with some of the lore and speculation of the last year, but very strange. It comes from a lore card that shows a Guardian exploring the reaches of the Ascendant Plane with Mara Sov's assistance. It's here that we can see a Guardian stumbling upon something rather unexpected. To get the fuller context on all this, the Guardian is exploring the Ascendant Plane as part of another one of the missions this season to free prisoners from the pyramid complexes on Earth. It's at this moment that something pretty atypical happens. Something goes wrong, and our Guardian takes a bit of a tumble into nothingness. The lore here can be found on the Unyielding Favor leg armor from the season, and it reads as follows. Druis stood at the edge of the floating rock in the Ascendant Plane, silently counted to 3, and leapt. At the apex of her jump, she flared her light in a buoyant pulse around her, then began floating downward, and kept floating. She groaned as she awkwardly missed the distant ledge she sought, and instead drifted slowly into the blackness below. She reached out for purchase along the side of the chasm, but her gloves met only the fleshy cilia of the egregore. She recoiled. Egregore fungus in the Ascendant Plane? But then sank her hands deep into the stuff to slow her fall. She came to a rest on a boulder, caught unsteadily in a clump of writhing fungus. Druis squinted up through the darkness. Waving egregore fronds bobbed into her field of vision, and she pushed them aside. She brought the sleeve of her green velvet robe to her mouth, trying in vain not to inhale the cloud of foul spores that hissed steadily from the fungal pods. She focused herself. "Come on, Queen's Guard," she muttered. "You can do this." She thought of Queen Mara and concentrated her light beneath her, forcing herself upwards to... A pervasive whispering pushed into her mind as a sticky tendril brushed against her arm. She swatted it back and focused again. She thought of the prisoners languishing within the pyramid outposts, innocents who needed... A wet Peleus flopped onto her boot, thrumming with terrible memories. She kicked it away with a snarl and thought of her allies, those she'd helped and been helped by along her journey. The stone shifted beneath her as the Ascendant Plane rearranged itself with a lurch. She looked up as the egregore on the sides of the abyss began to intertwine, sealing her in. There was a cold shock of fear. Then, rage. "I will not die here," she thought. "Not in this place. I will not be food for this creeping filth. Druis thought of herself. Her light flashed upward, cutting through the nothingness, and touched the favor of the Awoken. Spirals of tiny purple crystals sprouted from the ground beneath her boots. The shifting stone she stood on locked in place, fused into an amethyst mass. An egregore pod wavering inches from her face froze, crystal encrusted like a piece of sugared fruit. It bent heavily, then snapped under its own weight and shattered on the ground. Druis weathered her light around herself. The egregore on the side of the chasm recoiled as if burned, revealing handholds of bare, clean stone. She nodded, tightened her sash, and began the arduous climb back to the top. So, there's egregore in the Ascendant Plane. Why does any of that matter? I imagine for some of you the question is instead going to be, what the hell is egregore? If you've joined recently, hi, don't worry, we'll start there. Egregore is a fungus, and as I'm sure some of you will know, it's got a lot of properties that tie it to darkness in all its facets. First of all, it's something that specifically can only take root in dead tissue instead of in soil. This means that you'll only see egregore growing around corpses, as opposed to a more mundane mushroom, which might feed on some dead matter, but also probably takes root in soil. This aspect that revolves around death is something which ties it to our more traditional understandings of darkness, as linked with the negative themes of death and destruction. But egregore's true link with darkness is in its mind-expanding properties. Let's take a listen to Calus and what he had to say about that back in the Season of the Haunted. He talked a lot on the Leviathan about Egregore and the fact that it was growing and changing the Leviathan, but when talking about Egregore more generally, this is some of what he had to say.
Do you know these fungi are drawn to the unique psychological phenomenon of death, the moment of true terror before life ends. The death of sentient beings fosters the growth of these fungi. Normally, it takes centuries for them to spread like this, but
Calus sacrificed countless lives to feed his pet project. This is horrifying.
So death and the moment of terror that precedes it feeds this fungus. Let's remember what Osiris said about the darkness in Lightfall.
For so long, we saw dark and light as antagonists. If these are not moral forces, if they are not opposites, what are they? At its root, the Traveler is a terraformer, a gardener. It generates natural life, physical transformation at a molecular scale across whole planets. The domain of the light is the domain of the physical. The darkness then is revealed in many facets. Dreams and nightmares, emotions, pain. Darkness is something entirely apart from light. A paracausal union, conjoining intangible conscious realities, discursively linking.
So the Egregore is feeding off the greater darkness, fueled power of the moment of someone's death. But there's more to it than that. Take a listen to this next bit here.
There's spores in the air here. Same kind we'd seen aboard Calus's research vessel Glycon. They don't seem to be harmful.
aspirating the Egregore spores allows them to take root in your body. While they are symbiotic, they are also short-lived. But for a time, they join your consciousness to that of the mycelial network and other minds that would witness you.
So Egregore is something that specifically has to take root in dead flesh, but it's also capable of linking you to a mycelial network that reaches out across the vastness of space and can link you to other minds that are also conjoined in that network. So yeah, this is kind of similar to something else, something Cloudark shaped. I know we've already covered how this is very similar to the Veil and a bunch of other stuff to do with it, so yeah, just keep that in mind. This may not be a coincidence. For the moment though, stay with me because the Veil, whilst similar in function, is probably not the same as Egregore, and more importantly than that, there are some other bits and pieces about Egregore that we learn from other places which are relevant to our topic of discussion today. When Eris and the Drifter conducted further experiments upon Egregore during the Season of the Haunted, they discovered that when it was burned up, it was capable of connecting one's mind to the rest of the network as well. This was something which happened because I guess you burned off all the Egregore and you connected all of yourself to it momentarily. It could potentially provide a greater degree of insight this way, but that's unconfirmed. It simply reads that way when you read the actual lore entries. Eris also divines that the network is connected to the pyramids on Europa and Luna, as well as the Leviathan and Glycon Volatus. These 4 points in the network are also seemingly connected to something far out in the depths of space. It's never confirmed what this is. Originally, I thought that this was the Witness, but now I'm not so sure what it is. Could it be the Veil? Who knows? With all the fungus stuff going on though, it could be the planet where the spores came from. Because remember, these spores were all found on a planet that was just absolutely covered in Egregore, which I have talked a little bit about the biology of what a planet like that would need to have, but you would need to see a planet that has an ecosystem where things are constantly at each other's throat. I don't know if anybody has played StarCraft 2, but if you know Xeris, yeah, Xeris. Something like a world where everything is constantly fighting, dying, and evolving at rapid pace. This all, however, brings us back to the egregore in the Ascendant Plane discovered by Druis, our guardian. This egregore is a whole lot more active than any of the other egregore that we've seen. It seems to actively want to impede the guardian, even to trap them. This is a moment at which it seems to further imply more reasons that it's dangerous. Not only did the egregore try to close the guardian in, but it seemed to act with obvious intent. When the guardian was trying to use her resolve to free herself, very deliberately, seemingly the egregore would make contact with her and spread negative memories that would disrupt her. This is perhaps something which implies a greater degree of control within the egregore, whether that's something designed as sentience, whether it's something that implies a third hand that's controlling the egregore, or whether it's just an instinctual reaction that the egregore has when someone is approaching that moment of death. It's not clear, but either way, this is a dangerous ability, and it seems so deliberate that we have to contemplate how this even happens. More importantly than all of that though, if the witness is somehow still connected to the network, which is a big if considering that we don't know where it's gone and how connected it still is, but it's worth contemplating the idea that it could be using the egregore to spy on us this whole time, and that if it's been doing so, and if this is all in the Ascendant Plane now, we have something much more troubling to concern ourselves with. If the witness controls the greater network of egregore, or if it's gifted it as a tool to one of its disciples, then there is a degree of insight that it might be able to gain that we would never even realize. Eris talked about hearing indecipherable voices within the network, and, well, it's entirely possible that the witness might be the source of, or at least might understand, those voices. Beyond all of this, we know that the egregore must be connected to a variety of worlds. I wonder if there are others with control over the network that might be based on these worlds. Xivu Arath might be one candidate for such control, but of course there is nothing more than speculation to this. If we move again later in the year into the Ascendant Plane, be careful, look out for egregore, and remember what you learned aboard the Glycon. Be ready also to burn it away. It is linked into the darkness that has surrounded the system, and also to the Witness and all of its compatriots. This is something we need to take care of, even when we're not searching for pyramid complexes and broken architecture. This is something where egregore may lead us to something new. We need to be aware of it. And if you see it again, take note. I imagine that it is not there for no purpose at all. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, go ahead and leave a like, and tell me what your thoughts are. Is there some more significance specifically to the egregore being in the Ascendant Plane? If there is, go ahead and leave it down below. Of course, if you want more Destiny lore content, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Rhodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.